there is a fragment. Yes, I'm with Barbara Corbett, who's a Jersey advocate, presumably also an English lawyer.
English solicitor.
English solicitor. You are still able to practice in the UK if you wished?
Yes, because I maintain my English practicing certificate and CPD.
You said the other day when we met that your husband's an English QC.
Yes, he is.
So you have quite a legal background, legal interest. It's you're swamped in law. Not like the general public, of course, who, generally speaking, only want to know the legal implications of something when something hits them, don't they? When they get the sack from their job, or they get knocked over by a motor car, or these sort of things. Mm-hmm. So you've got knowledge in your head about law, which you're quite at ease with. It's
I've got knowledge in my head, yes.
And that's a great advantage going through life, isn't it? Because law affects everybody. To actually be at ease with law, to understand it.
It took me quite a long time to get the knowledge in my head. I studied for many years in England to qualify, and then I worked for 2 years as a trainee solicitor, where you get paid very, very low wages, where you follow around and learn on the job. Then when I came to Jersey, I was learning on the job for 3 years. Then I did the Jersey law course. It was 9 months from September to June 2009 to 2010, and that's quite intensive. It takes a lot of time. While I was studying, it was long hours, long days. So yes, I have the knowledge in my head, but it's not just got there like that. It's taken a long time to get there. Jersey is a very small jurisdiction. When I first came here, I think there were 70 Jersey lawyers. There's now 250. No, there were 320.
320. But the law site, the Jersey law site, says that only about 140 or so of those are in practice. So what does that mean?
That's not true.
It says 90 odd advocates and 40 odd solicitors.
Well, I think the Jersey Law Society website is in the process of being revamped, and it'll go live very shortly. So anything that's on there now is out of date. And I don't know the exact figures of numbers in practice, but
what would be the difference between being a lawyer and not being? In other words, are they retired lawyers? Are they not in the island? What's the difference between?
Well, you become a lawyer when you qualify, and if you remain in practice, as I do in England, I continue with my English practicing certificate. So I pay my subscription every year, and I keep up to date with the law, and I keep qualified in English law, and I also keep qualified in Jersey law. People who, for whatever reason, decide not to practice law anymore. Either they might retire, they might be having a career break, or they might decide they don't want to do law anymore and go off and do something else, like teaching or dressmaking or anything else. If they're not actually practicing law, i.e. they're not making their living by law, then they're not practicing. And so in Jersey, they can become associate members of the Law Society, so that they retain their membership because they are qualified lawyers, but they have a reduced subscription.
The point I was trying to get at was that for the general public, the choice of actual lawyers is not 300. It's on an everyday basis. If you want a lawyer to advise you, it's more like the 140 or the 150 who are in practice.
I don't know the exact number, but it's not the total of 300, because some of those lawyers will be working for the actually, no, the law officers department lawyers aren't in the Law Society, aren't members of the Law Society, so they won't be on the list of 300.
Even if they're Jersey lawyers?
Yeah, they're not members of the Law Society, so they're not on the list. So there are more lawyers in Jersey than are members of the Law Society.
You take my point. The drift of one of the perennial problems of complaints from Jersey over the years has been access to law, knowledge about law, access to representation.
Well, it depends what you mean by access to law, and I'm not saying there aren't necessarily difficulties with access to law, but I don't think numbers of lawyers per se is the answer, because per population, I think there are probably more lawyers per head of population in Jersey than there are in many parts of England and Wales.
Well, that might be true of doctors in Jersey, but the amount of illness in Jersey is phenomenal, so I think I rather suspect the lack of knowledge on Jersey law amongst the general population is very high, because it is such an obscure subject and not easily accessible. And the fact that it's not only a case of having 150 or so, if that's the number in practice of Jersey lawyers, but inevitably you need a specialist lawyer if something happens to you. And obviously the number of the chances of you find the right specialist lawyer to deal with your particular complaint, grievance, whatever it might be, is rather remote, isn't it?
I think it depends on what the specialism is. There are some extremely highly qualified and skilled specialist lawyers in Jersey, and it's only Jersey lawyers who can advise on Jersey law.
But if you get knocked down by a motor car and you get injuries, or if your doctor makes a mistake with his diagnosis, in my experience, inevitably, the first thing that your Jersey lawyer, if you go to, is he writes off to an English QC for an advice. It depends.
It depends on what the circumstances are. Some may do that. Now, there are different reasons for that. If it's a question of somebody who's in receipt of legal aid, it may actually be reasonable for an expert opinion from, say, a negligence specialist in England to do a report if the legal aid lawyer who had been appointed doesn't have that specialism themselves. In fact, as far as personal injury is concerned, at Hanson Renner, we've just taken on a specialist English lawyer who is going to train as a Jersey lawyer, a Jersey advocate, and she can provide specialist advice in relation to negligence, personal injury, which is probably a first because her experience and also in clinical negligence is probably greater
but generally,
than anybody else in Jersey.
That seems to indicate that what I'm describing is a real problem, that the expertise is not there in depth.
It depends, because there are different, in Jersey, law comes from different sources. Some of the law is statute law, some of it's customary law. And some areas of law are very similar to England, and some of the concepts are very similar to English law, and therefore it is sensible and helpful to have specialist advice from English lawyers. There are other areas of law which are distinctly Jersey, and there's nobody apart from Jersey lawyers who can advise on those particular areas.
I think it was Sir Godfrey Lacane who did a report on Jersey law and legal services. I think the year was 1982, and one of his suggestions was that because of the obscurity of Jersey law and the difficulty keeping it up to date with international standards, that it should be abolished entirely and a different legal system adopted. That didn't go down too very well amongst Jersey lawyers, but do you not think that would be simplify the whole procedure so that we would overcome many problems by doing that?
Well, I don't think you would particularly, because I don't think that there are many countries in the world who would say that their legal systems are perfect, and I certainly wouldn't agree that all the laws in England are perfect, and I wouldn't want Jersey to wholesale adopt the laws of England, because there are certainly things that need changing there. Jersey is a small jurisdiction and we have specific requirements, and we need to have a law that has differences from other countries. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on everything, and there are certain things whereby we can follow, and in fact the Jersey statutes often follow statutes from other countries, notably England, such as the trust law and the children law, matrimonial causes law. But there are property law, for example, in Jersey is very distinct and very different from England, and you wouldn't be able to just take over the English law because the background is
perfection is a standard which is not realistically going to be achieved anywhere, but I think the history books, the Privy Council registers show that the grievances that have been going out from Jersey and Guernsey for that matter about the inadequacies of the legal system, the knowledge that's available, access to the books on Jersey law has been going on for centuries and centuries. I know that it's being improved, but for the ordinary Joe public who actually lives here, bearing in mind a lot of them don't, their first language isn't English.
You're quite
it's
wrong.
very confusing.
These days there has been a huge increase in the available knowledge of Jersey law. There is the Jersey Law website, which is a phenomenally useful website. It's better than many across the world. There's the Jersey and Guernsey Law Review. Now, these are two matters that have been instigated by Philip Balash over time. They are really extremely good resources for Jersey lawyers and for Jersey members of the public, accessible. As I've just explained before, there's even more information available on the Institute of Law website, freely available to anybody, are the study guides for the Jersey Law Course. So you can access information about Jersey law in a very accessible format. So anybody who wishes to know about any area of Jersey law which Jersey lawyers learn about can access it freely from the Institute of Law. Now that is a change. In the past, when Jersey lawyers were were taught to pass their exams, it was done in-house by their own firms, the large firms. People at small firms had to learn by themselves on the hoof. And the notes were jealously guarded and passed from person to person. No longer the case. The Institute of Law, which is again a fairly recent development, has made law accessible to everybody. More than that, my partner Tim Hansen is developing a Jersey procedure book called the Red Book, which is available. The chapters that have been completed are already available on the Hansen Renner website, freely available to anybody. It explains the procedure, it gives details of the Royal Court rules and case law that's relevant to each rule, and other laws that are specific to that. It's an extremely good resource. It's equivalent to the English White Book, which is the Bible for civil procedure in England, and this is the Jersey equivalent, and it's been written at no payment by Jersey lawyers, not just Advocate Hansen, but Advocate Jean-Marie Renouf and Advocate Kelleher and Advocate Paul Tracy, and many others have contributed to this book. And this isn't a commercial matter. No one's charging people to read it. It's freely available to everybody, lawyers and others.
The general public will be delighted if paper copies at least are available in the public library for them to browse.
When it's completed, there will be paper copies, but at the moment it's freely accessible, which is easier than going to the public library because it's freely accessible from everybody's computer terminal, and it's on the Hansen Renner website.
We met the other evening at the Jersey Human Rights Group, which I'm sorry to say hasn't got a single Jersey lawyer on it. Nobody wants to get involved with promoting human rights in the Jersey legal profession, and I notice, as far as I know, there is still not even a human rights group in the Jersey Law Society itself. These sort of omissions don't encourage me to think that the Law Society membership is very forward-looking.
Why not?
Well, human rights is such an everyday matter now, and it's such an important aspect of law internationally. I don't see how you can ignore it or appear to ignore it.
Well, I'm not sure it is being ignored. I mean, human rights needs to be considered in litigation before the courts and drafting of legislation all the time. And as I explained, we've got the signatories to the European Convention of Human Rights. The human rights law brings the European Convention into Jersey law, and there are lots of, but because it's in law, it means that we now have, Jersey people have access to the European Court once local remedies have been exhausted, but
that's just one convention. I mean, there are so many other conventions which Jersey hasn't even ratified. Why are the Jersey lawyers not protesting about that?
Why is it, who ratifies the conventions?
Well, the United Kingdom ratifies them on behalf of Jersey, but the momentum has to come from within Jersey, and the momentum in most societies is that the people with the knowledge, the lawyers who push...
Let's talk about conventions. There is a convention, the United Nations Rights of the Child, and that has not been ratified by Jersey. There are only, I think it's just the United States and Somalia and Jersey are the only people that haven't ratified it, which is absolutely outrageous. Now, at the last strategic plan, which would be probably 4 years ago now, it was put on the list of things that Jersey should put in the strategic plan, and it was a proposition. Well, it was part of the strategic plan debate in the States, and it was put forward by Deputy Paul Leclerc, and it was defeated. Now, that was put forward. Deputy Paul Leclerc put that forward in conjunction with advice and assistance from lawyers who were keen to get this, children lawyers, they were keen to get this matter in the States, and it was States members who rejected it. States members, not lawyers.
Well, why would the Jersey Society for Lawyers not wholly put out a request or a statement to say that it should be ratified? I mean, if they were in most territories there are sufficient lawyers, a group of lawyers will campaign on these issues, but I'm not aware of any group of lawyers campaigning on such issues. It's not just that convention. Anti-discrimination legislation in Jersey is so far out of date, well, it's non-existent.
Well, discrimination legislation, or anti-discrimination legislation is being brought into Jersey law, and things do take time to work through. But actually, sitting around and talking about it isn't always the best way forward. Human rights are matters. The way to change the law is through the two ways: is through the states making laws and changing laws, amending laws, and through case law. Case is going to going to the courts and a Court of Appeal and the Privy Council, if necessary, to change the law.
Many people find that they need a lawyer and they need a legal aid lawyer. Now, we discussed at the Human Rights Group the other night about Jersey's legal aid system, and it was suggested that it's simply not fit for purpose.
That's right, it's not.
Well, it's within the compass, surely, of lawyers to do something about that, isn't it?
Well, it is. The difficulties with legal aid is that legal aid is available to people to access lawyers, but the obligation to provide the service of legal aid is on the states of Jersey. But in fact, the states of Jersey don't provide legal aid for litigants at all. It's not provided by the states of Jersey, it's provided by lawyers. And so the obligations which the states of Jersey have under the European Convention on Human Rights are actually abdicated by the states of Jersey.
Well, it's all very well to wash your hands, I mean, say it's the states, but the lawyers,
I'm not washing my hands.
the lawyers have a responsibility to say, look, this is not good enough, we're not providing an adequate service, something has to be done about it. Obviously, it can't be provided without their cooperation or acquiescence in the case that we got at the moment. It's not being provided.
The difficulty is with the states, because lawyers have been trying for many years for there to be an overhaul of the legal aid system. There have been regular meetings. In fact, there was a meeting with the Chief Minister in January this year, but the will to move things along is not in the states. States members haven't got the will to move things forward. The law needs to be changed, and it needs to be in conjunction with the states. Lawyers themselves cannot change the system. It needs to be done in conjunction with states members as well as lawyers.
The trouble, or my perception of part of the trouble with the lawyers, is that you have a very small group of people within the society. It's 100,000 population. If there's 300 Jersey lawyers, it's still a very small group, but they are in society an overly powerful group within society, because they permeate so many areas where power is concentrated from the bailiff downwards. Now, there's yet another complaint whizzing off to the UK government currently from a couple of Jersey States members about their experiences, and wider issues as well about the failings of the Jersey legal system and the judicial system. I mean, there have been complaints of this nature going on for centuries from Jersey, and the Privy Council registers, as I say, are stuffed with them. Don't you think perhaps the lawyers in Jersey are being a bit too complacent on these sort of issues?
No, I don't. You
don't think there is a problem?
No, I didn't say I don't think it's a problem, but I don't think lawyers are complacent. The Law Society is alive to the difficulties. I'm not fully aware of the details of the applications being made to England, but Jersey is a separate jurisdiction from England, and the United Kingdom government isn't responsible for Jersey law and for the Jersey states. We're a separate jurisdiction, and things should be dealt with within Jersey.
Well, that might be true, except that ultimately the British government has a responsibility for the good government and all the rest of it that goes on. And strangely enough, the Justice Department, correct me, the Justice Department is now invited, a follow-up from the previous inquiry they did a few years ago, for people to contact the Justice Department with any representations they have about the administration in Jersey. Now, that seems to indicate to me that the British government does have a responsibility to look at these issues.
There are lots of people in the British government who don't even realise that Jersey has a separate legal system and is a separate jurisdiction.
I think the Justice Department is probably aware of that fact.
Well, actually, I don't think they always were.
So, whose fault is that?
Well, I think that they're not very well educated over in England.
Ill-educated English lawyers, you think?
Not English lawyers, English politicians, English government.
It sounds like in your world the politicians are the bad guys and the lawyers are the good guys. Is that the way you perceive it?
No, there are good politicians and there are good lawyers, and there are bad politicians and there are bad lawyers. And there are mediocre politicians and mediocre lawyers. Politicians and lawyers are actually human beings like everybody else.
There was, for a few years, a shortage of lawyers in the Jersey states. There's now a few in there now. The idea that people can make so much money in commercial law in Jersey, and that they don't devote themselves, the best quality lawyers don't go into public service because the salaries, the rewards are not so great, and the career structure is not very attractive for a lot of them. Do you think that's a valid observation?
I'm not quite sure where all these questions are leading to. Because on the one hand, you say lawyers are too powerful, far too powerful, and involved in too many things in Jersey, and the next moment you're saying you want more lawyers in the States. Which is it?
Well, you're saying that politicians are inadequate.
No.
The suggestion would be to put some lawyers in amongst them to beef them up a bit.
That's not true. I did not say politicians are inadequate. I said that some politicians in England aren't fully aware of the jurisdictional differences and the fact that Jersey is a separate jurisdiction. I didn't say that politicians
But
are
you're
inadequate.
saying, in the practical local sense, that the reason we've got a inadequate, not fit for purpose legal aid system is for the politicians. Now, if you had lawyers in the States, say, for example, or more vociferous lawyers outside, presumably that could not prevail, that situation, could it?
Well, the thing is, the people who are in the States are there because they're elected, and there have been lawyers standing for the States and lawyers getting in, but I mean, the people who are elected to the States, there have been lawyers and haven't been elected, so it's not really I can't see how that's down to
the problems I'm outlining. I mean, for example, I find somebody came to me the other day, their husband had died, and they had to administer probate, and they went down to the graph here, and they said, oh, you must engage a lawyer. Well, they didn't have to engage a lawyer, but that was the advice they were given, and it was very difficult for an ordinary person for themselves, but they did sort out their own probate, but they had to challenge all sorts of decisions, administrative decisions, all the way down the line into being able to do it. Practical things, silly things, which shouldn't be so in the 21st century. It should be a simple matter for somebody to do their simple probate. Those sort of practical issues come up every day for hundreds of people in Jersey. But the lawyers who could simplify this process, could make access to the law so much simpler. Obviously, for the most part, they're engaged in more lucrative matters.
But it is true, there are lots of things that are that could be streamlined, and money could be saved, time could be saved. For example, as Abka Hansen mentioned at the Law Society seminar that we put on justice, but at what cost? He pointed out the cost in time and court time and lawyers' time in having contracts passed, always on a Friday in the family court. Well, if the contracts were passed in front of the greffier or in some other way without having to have a court hearing, that could save money, because it isn't just the lawyers who are in court to pass contract. What it means is it holds up the whole of the court list, so that you have to go to court for 2:30 when the court starts for your case, whatever it might be, but you're waiting for all the contracts to be passed first, and that can be half an hour, an hour and a half, and all that court time, lawyers' time, is wasted. So that's a possible area for streamlining the system, but it isn't a question of lawyers changing these things. That there has to be a change from higher up, and the states have to consider it, and the judiciary have to consider it. Lawyers alone can't just decide to change.
The lawyers are most likely to be aware of the inadequacies because they're dealing with these things on a daily basis. Joe Bloggs encounters it once or twice in his lifetime on a particular thing. Lawyers encounter it every day. They know where the problems are. They know where the inadequacies and the service are. It wouldn't have seemed to me to be too difficult for lawyers to address those things and put out some fairly comprehensive suggestions for reform.
Who would you suggest doing that? The Law Society.
Law Society.
The Law Society does. The Law Society is undertaking, has provided papers and on all sorts of things of changing the way the Law Society itself works and the regulation of lawyers and the disciplinary process, which is clearly of interest to members of the public, and also in relation to the anti-money laundering, which is clearly a very important matter for an offshore jurisdiction. The Law Society is concerned about that. The Law Society is making approaches to states members in relation to legal aid and preparing proposals for changing legal aid. On a regular basis, the Law Society provides advice and assistance and comments for legislation of all sorts of matters. I don't think you're fully aware how much work the Law Society does. And of course, the Law Society, in all this work, does it voluntarily. The Law Society members who provide answers to consultations don't get paid for it.
Well, as do many plumbers and other people in society, and loads of people giving their time voluntarily, because there's a lot of volunteer workers in Jersey. It's nothing unique to lawyers. I don't think there was a special praise for doing things which actually are a duty amongst lawyers.
I'm not suggesting that there should be special praise, but what you seem to be suggesting is that lawyers don't do anything without being paid, and that is not the case, because not only legal aid, which is we've discussed before, lawyers don't get paid for. There are all sorts of other matters which lawyers provide information and support to states and to other bodies and to charities and all sorts of things. And as lawyers or in their own personal capacity, which they never get paid for, they don't trumpet, they don't shout from the rooftops. And lawyers just seem to be a convenient whipping boy and convenient scapegoats for members of the public who have a...
Well, it did say on the Jersey Law Society, and I don't know where the reference was, but it did say we're not the most popular people in the world. I thought it was a rather unusual observation for a profession to make about itself. But
all over the world, people are derisory about lawyers, and they insult lawyers, and there are books of lawyer jokes, anti-lawyer jokes. It goes with the territory. Yeah, it's just to be accepted. It's probably discriminatory. It's probably something that you could argue against in the European court. But actually, we've got broad backs.
Well, I suppose mother-in-laws could make the same complaint. But for the future, just to wind up, what's the priority, do you think, about reform, change, improvement?
Access to justice.
For who?
Access to justice for everybody.
Okay.
Including lawyers.
Including lawyers, yes. I feel really sorry for lawyers. I'll leave it there.